At the entrance of the sacred land Tianhe lay an illusory river. But its interior was actually boundless and endlessly deep. Deep within Tianhe, Yu Shui country master cultivated inside a flying boat, absorbing the river's water to nourish his primordial bloodline. Although Emperor Tian Kun and his 5 companions had been blocking the outer regions for a long time, they did not dare venture into the dangerous depths. Yu Shui country master patiently waited, hoping to make another breakthrough and comprehend an ultimate realm secret technique from his bloodline, which would allow him to defeat all 6 enemies alone. Suddenly, he received alarming news that Lan Duo monarch from Thunder Ancient Country had entered Tianhe. Knowing the danger, Yu Shui country master immediately fled deeper into the river despite its terrifying hazards. Along the way, he discovered an underwater mountain range whose invisible fluctuations rapidly eroded his body. Realizing he could not survive, he threw his God King grade flying boat, containing all his treasures accumulated over countless ages, into the mountain range for safekeeping before fleeing again. However, after only a short time, Lan Duo monarch locked onto him through causality. The monarch, clad in water blue robes and covered in blue and white scales, possessed overwhelming power, even from a vast distance. A mere glance from him brought immense pressure that completely annihilated Yu Shui country master's body in less than a breath. After confirming that the treasures had been hidden away, Lan Duo monarch continued his patrol. Although Tianhe appeared immense, its safe regions were limited and familiar to Lan Duo monarch. He systematically searched them all. The imperial families of the 2 ancient countries and the guest elders of Thunder Ancient Country were spared. But every other godly king he encountered was killed without exception. Emperor Tian Kun and his companions also tried to flee deeper into Tianhe after hearing the news. But Lan Duo monarch quickly found them. Emperor Tian Kun was annihilated, and among his 5 companions, 4 died as well. In the end, over 90% of the ancient godly kings within Tianhe lost their bodies during Lan Duo monarch's patrol. Only a few escaped through exceptional methods or by exploiting the environment. Both Yu Shui country master and Emperor Tian Kun truly died in this disaster. Back in Huyang City, Luo Feng received the news. Yu Shui country master explained that Tianhe greatly favored those with the water origin bloodline and rejected other great Dao powers. Among the 2 ancient countries, only Emperor Zan and Lan Duo monarch possessed such bloodlines. And whenever they visited Tianhe, they usually patrolled the region and slaughtered everyone except their own allies. Luo Feng realized that unlike places such as the Dream Domain or Infinite Space, Tianhe offered little protection because its safe regions were easy to locate, while its dangerous zones were nearly impossible to enter. Yu Shui country master accepted his misfortune calmly, noting that 5 of his 6 enemies had also lost their true bodies and would no longer threaten him. Luo Feng, however, sighed inwardly. A single monarch was enough to sweep through nearly all independent cultivators. The Flame-Wind Ancient Country had 13 emperors and Thunder Ancient Country had 9 monarchs, while the scattered cultivators possessed only a handful of experts capable of matching them. Even stronger beings above the godly king level existed in the 2 ancient countries. This overwhelming disparity explained why independent cultivators often hid in secret or allied themselves with the 3 alien races to compete for resources. Meanwhile, in the treasured land Infinite Space, one of Luo Feng's avatars continued cultivating on an island in a misty lake. Since Morosa had reached the 2nd realm of Godly King and fully manifested the great Tao of Destruction origin, Luo Feng's own understanding of the Destruction Tao had entered a period of rapid growth. A dark chaotic hole appeared in his palm, containing terrifying vitality and countless condensed blade lights. At that moment, Luo Feng successfully perfected the move called Chaotic Hole Undying Light, the first Godly King's 2nd realm secret technique he had ever created. The technique fused 5 major branches, the Heaven-Splitting, Dark Heaven, and Mixed Heaven branches of destruction, together with the Origin of Life and Life spirituality branches of the Life and Death Tao. Luo Feng was astonished because, among the great Taos of life, destruction, and life and death, it was the Life and Death Tao that had first allowed him to create a 2nd realm technique. Although creating such a technique did not mean he had truly reached the 2nd realm of Godly King, it still represented an extraordinary achievement. The Chaotic Whole Undying Light, which perfectly merged 5 branches from 2 great Taos, was even more profound than the techniques currently mastered by Morosa. As he sat cross-legged, contemplating life and death, a new understanding arose within him. The creation of this technique transformed his perception of the great Tao of life and death, and for the first time, the various branches of that Tao gradually began taking shape deep within his heart. After spending more than 2 centuries in the infinite space treasure vault, Luo Feng had accumulated a deep understanding of the great Tao of life and death and had already created 19 First Realm God King secret techniques. When he upgraded the chaotic whole undying light to the second realm of God King level, his understanding underwent a qualitative transformation. He spent 3 more days comprehending the Tao and eventually realized 6 branches of the great Tao of life and death. Though he felt the Tao was still incomplete and that he lacked enough accumulation to understand the remaining parts. Based on his insights, he concluded that the great Tao of life and death should contain 9 major branches, built upon the 6 branches of life and the 6 branches of destruction. The 6 branches he had already comprehended were the blood-dripping lineage, red sun lineage, annihilation lineage, eternal lineage, black smoke lineage, and walker lineage. He understood that there could have been dozens or even hundreds of possible branches created by combining life and destruction. But he deliberately discarded countless possibilities and chose only the paths that truly matched his own Tao. Wondering why infinite space had not rewarded him, Luo Feng demonstrated the walker lineage, creating a dark humanoid figure formed from countless secret patterns. Infinite space immediately recognized that he had pioneered a new great Tao and awarded him 10.000 reward points, rating the new Tao as superior. It also recognized that his spiritual will had reached the ultimate realm of God King, granting another 10.000 points. His total reward points became 20.182.01. When he demonstrated another branch, the blood-dripping lineage, he discovered that infinite space only rewards points for the first branch of a newly created great Tao. This made him realize just how difficult it was to earn reward points. Even with his exceptional talent, he had accumulated only a little over 20,000 points, while many ancient god kings earned far fewer. Luo Feng then reviewed the infinite space treasure vault. Most cultivators came there not for treasures but for rare inheritances, including special grade and perfect inheritances unavailable elsewhere. He reserved 6.000 points to eventually obtain the second realm chapters of World Life Form and Chaotic Whole Beast Body. Afterward, he examined the treasures. The most valuable item was the Heart's Desire flying boat, costing 20.000 points. A God King level treasure that was indestructible within the source world and capable of instant travel. Another top treasure was the Tao map, also costing 20.000 points, which could greatly assist cultivation and technique creation, though over-reliance on it would make fully comprehending a complete great Tao much harder. 2 treasures attracted Luo Feng the most. The first was the Lotus Heart Seed, costing 18.000 points, which could create a life lotus inside his internal universe, strengthen his body, and make him a favored child of the great Tao of life. The second was the Destruction Scale, costing 12.000 points, which could transform his body into that of a destruction demon race and make him a favored child of the great Tao of destruction. However, it required ultimate realm spiritual will and was best used by someone who possessed an avatar. Since he met all the requirements and was eager to experience being favored by the great Tao of destruction, Luo Feng decisively chose the Destruction Scale, spending 12.000 reward points in one move. Moments later, the Destruction Scale was teleported directly into his hands inside the quiet room of the Huyang City Lord's mansion. Luo Feng, while inside a spatial layer of the Star Tower, obtains a mysterious scale of destruction. He immediately recognizes its extraordinary value, comparable to treasures beyond the godly king level. With a market reference of around 12.500 merit points in the infinite space treasure vault. The scale itself is black with faint green tinted transparent edges, and when magnified reveals countless intricate, sealed secret patterns that completely suppress its aura. When Luo Feng probes it with his consciousness, he is instantly struck by an overwhelming and violent murderous will. The intent is purely destructive, kill, 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 so intense that even his God King level ultimate will barely resists it. he becomes deeply alarmed, realizing that even a single refined scale still carries the residual will of an unimaginable existence, implying the original life form was of terrifying power, and that the refiner is also beyond his comprehension. After carefully observing the scale for 3 days and recording the portion of decipherable secret patterns, Luo Feng decides to integrate it. Before doing so, he creates a major avatar of his perfect divine body, transferring 99% of his divine power into it, while his main body retains a small portion and begins recovery through his small universe. He then presses the scale of destruction directly into his chest. At the moment of fusion, the scale merges into his skin and immediately triggers a violent body transformation. The hidden power within erupts, rapidly eroding and reconstructing every layer of his body, skin, flesh, bones, and even microscopic structures. The transformation is so intense that even his enormous divine power reserves, comparable to a world life form, can only endure for a little more than 10 breaths. When the process completes, the scale disintegrates entirely, leaving no trace behind. The resulting body is a destroyer clan demon-like avatar. It is covered in pale blue scales, distinct from the original black scale, with a natural golden glow in its eyes, a tail growing from its body, and 6 horns emerging from its head. These horns faintly resonate with the great Tao of destruction origin. However, Luo Feng assesses its combat strength as relatively average, barely reaching the threshold of the second realm of godly kings, and significantly weaker than his world life form avatar. Its true value is not raw power, but its affinity with the Tao of destruction. When he moves his claw and senses the Tao, Luo Feng realizes this body allows him to directly perceive and manipulate the great Tao of destruction origin as if he is part of it. The resonance is so strong that his comprehension speed increases dramatically. However, sensitivity to other great Taos becomes blurred and weakened. He compares it to the 5-colored treasure medicine, which he previously consumed. That medicine allowed both body and spirit to resonate with the Tao of destruction for about 3 eras. But it costs around 10 million merit points per use. In contrast, the scale of destruction only enhances the body, not the spirit. Yet its effect on the body alone is even stronger than the medicine. Most importantly, its effect is permanent. Overall, he estimates it provides about 70 to 80% of the 5-colored treasure medicine's total effect. Because of this, Luo Feng concludes that his cultivation speed in the Tao of destruction will soon surpass his Tao of life. Although there exists another treasure, the lotus heart seed, that can similarly enhance affinity with the Tao of life, it is prohibitively expensive. Over long spans of time, era after era, Luo Feng continues cultivation while adapting to his new advantage. Even though he has become a favored child of the Tao of destruction, he understands that growth still requires accumulation, and compared to ancient beings in the land of origin, he is still extremely young and inexperienced. In the deeper dream domain, Luo Feng cultivates within a labyrinth-like spatial ruin, transforming into a stone while practicing the Great Destruction Heart Refining Technique. Part of Yuan's inheritance, Lai Yuan Technique. His spirit sits in a chaotic chaos hole, gradually forming a humanoid silhouette that continuously resists erosion from both the dream domain and his own soul refinement technique. Over 150 eras, he endures extreme mental strain. He repeatedly reaches his limit, collapses into the dream domain, and wakes up again. This happens dozens of times. Each awakening allows him to recall fragments of dreams, which slowly strengthen his spiritual will, though not enough to break through the ultimate God-King bottleneck. Within these dreams, Luo Feng experiences increasingly vivid and unsettling scenes. He repeatedly hears a summons, "The ancestor calls you." In the dream, he appears as a powerful being who has gained merit and awaits rewards or punishment from this ancestor. His emotional states fluctuate between anticipation, fear, and reverence, suggesting repeated cycles of such encounters. Eventually, the dream escalates. A colossal eye appears, belonging to the so-called ancestor, an existence obscured by endless layers of great Tao. Luo Feng feels overwhelming reverence but also instinctive terror. When his spiritual will reacts strongly, the dream begins to collapse, and he forcibly wakes up. Upon awakening, he realizes this time is different. The memory of the eye does not fade. Instead, it remains etched into his soul, producing uncontrollable fear and instability in his spiritual will. Even attempts to erase it fail, because the memory has fused deeply into his soul structure. Back in the Star Tower, all of Luo Feng's avatars confirm the same issue. The memory cannot be removed or suppressed permanently. Even annihilating an avatar does not eliminate it. He uses the Great Destruction heart refining technique to forcibly scrub away fear and intrusive thoughts, stabilizing his mind temporarily, but the root memory remains intact. He understands this as a form of memory contamination, similar in nature to contamination found in primordial bloodline inheritance. Such contamination cannot be fully removed once embedded in the soul. It can only be controlled through personal will. He notes that even reincarnation-level methods, like those experienced by Di Fu, cannot fully eliminate it. Thus, Luo Feng ends in a state where his spirit is temporarily stabilized. But the deep imprint of the ancestor's eye remains permanently embedded in his soul. In Huyang City, inside the city lord's mansion, Luo Feng sits alone in a pavilion drinking wine, troubled and deep in thought. Morosa notices his abnormal state and approaches, offering assistance, but Luo Feng says it is something beyond Morosa's help. He has encountered a great terror that triggers uncontrollable fear, affecting his cultivation and reducing his mental clarity despite using the Great Destruction heart refining technique. Morosa is puzzled, unable to understand why such fear would exist for someone at Luo Feng's level. Luo Feng explains that it is not a life-threatening danger but a deep, instinctive fear arising from a memory, specifically the image of a gigantic eye seen in the dream realm. Morosa suggests that fear should simply be controlled by the heart itself, prompting Luo Feng to realize that this may be the key, mastering intrinsic fear through mental control. Luo Feng immediately leaves and enters a space within the Star Tower. There, he repeatedly confronts the memory of the giant eye. At first, the fear overwhelms him repeatedly, forcing him to alternate between resisting it and using the Great Destruction heart refining technique to clear his mind. Over time, through prolonged exposure and repeated confrontation, his mental resistance gradually strengthens. After long years of persistence, the fear significantly weakens until he can withstand it without relying on the heart refining technique. As his control improves, Luo Feng begins analyzing the source of the fear and becomes interested in the structure of the giant eye. He uses it as inspiration to create a new secret technique based on the Tao of life and death, drawing from all 9 branches of the Tao, especially eternal, blood dripping, reincarnation, red sun, black smoke, and nihility. He attempts to fuse 6 of them into a single integrated technique that reflects the essence of the eye. He isolates himself from outside matters, even refusing reincarnation tower expeditions, focusing entirely on creation and refinement. Later, by using the 7 emotions heart refining technique, the fear is reawakened strongly, allowing him to refine the technique further with clearer perception of emotional intensity. After more than 30 decades of continuous study and refinement, Luo Feng finally completes the technique. The giant eye no longer causes fear, as full understanding dissolves its mystery. He realizes the technique is a life and destruction Tao second realm secret method, far surpassing his previous creation, the chaotic whole undying light. He concludes that the technique could potentially approach ultimate realm level depending on its integration. Finally, Luo Feng executes the technique, his right hand transforming with overwhelming destructive force. With a single strike, he tears open the source world membrane, revealing a massive trench. He names this newly created technique the Great Extinction Style. Luo Feng observed a segment of dream memory in which fear had completely disappeared, leaving only a sense of regret that it was merely a dream fragment and not a clearer, more Gen Shi experience. Having already been a godly king for over 2 centuries, he had spent almost all his time within the dream domain cultivating through the destruction refinement method. After creating the Great Extinction Style, he began to feel mental and spiritual fatigue while simultaneously maintaining both the Great Destruction heart refining technique and the 7 emotions heart refining technique. With emotional turbulence gradually accumulating within his spirit, concluding that he needed relief, he decided to deliberately loosen his mental state using the 7 emotions technique, and thus dispatched a black-clad avatar from Huyang City toward the Shi Kingdom, not only to relax but also to personally investigate the continent instead of relying on intelligence reports, as he had long intended to eliminate the 3 Shi Kingdom monarchs in revenge for his teacher but lacked first-hand understanding of the region. During his journey through the Shi Kingdom, Luo Feng continuously maintained the 7 emotions heart refining technique, causing all sensory and emotional experiences to be drastically amplified. He observed that although the Shi Kingdom Emperor Tian Kun was notorious for invasions and cruelty, its cities were still prosperous and culturally rich. Luo Feng wandered through multiple cities, listening to illusion-based musical performances, observing dancers, and tasting various foods. Under emotional amplification, pleasure, satisfaction, anger, and disgust were all intensified hundreds or even thousands of times. When rewarded with good experiences, he casually gave out large amounts of cosmic sand, astonishing merchants. When confronted with poor cooking quality caused by negligence and substitution of chefs, his disgust and anger surged to extreme levels, leading him to seize the chef and ultimately destroy the restaurant. He also disrupted a noisy eternal true god in a performance venue, directly expelling him from the city and causing the surrounding audience and performers to become extremely cautious, further refining their behavior in his presence. Later, Luo Feng arrived at the renowned Wind Snow Tower, where he brought his own fine wines and attended a performance by the Snow Tower Master, who was famed for ranking among the top illusion musicians in the Shi Kingdom. Her music and illusion techniques were deeply soul-influencing, and although Luo Feng's spiritual will prevented him from fully falling into an illusion, he was still profoundly affected. The performance, composed of 12 increasingly powerful pieces, resonated deeply with him, awakening long-buried memories of his youth, including training in martial halls and moments with his parents. After the performance ended, Luo Feng briefly realized he had unknowingly been drawn into an illusion, and he evaluated the Snow Tower Master as the strongest musician he had encountered, noting her near primal chaos realm attainment and exceptionally powerful spiritual will. After this, Luo Feng observed the Snow Tower Master more closely and quickly detected that she was under complete external control, with a hidden imprint embedded in her true god core. When she encountered him in a restricted area, she questioned how he bypassed the formation, and Luo Feng directly revealed her identity and condition, identifying her as a heavenly snow woman who had been enslaved by a mysterious force. The Snow Tower Master acknowledged his overwhelming strength but admitted she was not free to accept discipleship. Luo Feng then casually erased the controlling imprint and all secret restrictions, restoring her autonomy and declaring her free. She immediately pledged herself as his disciple and reported that the controlling force behind her was extremely powerful. At that moment, Luo Feng sensed that the true controller had arrived. A colossal thunder-wreathed god king then descended, sealing the entire region and demanding to know who had interfered with his secret technique and taken his divine son. He identified Luo Feng as being from the Blade River sect and attempted to intimidate him, threatening to destroy his sect if he resisted. Luo Feng calmly responded, questioning the opponent's identity. While the Snow Tower Master stood in shock at the confrontation, the attacker unleashed a massive cyan thunder palm capable of covering a city. But Luo Feng countered effortlessly, releasing a refined, chaotic whole undying light blade strike that instantly severed the arm and continued cutting through the attacker's body repeatedly, reducing him to fragmented thunder. Despite the opponent's claim of being a second realm god king, he was completely overwhelmed and forced to flee in shattered form. Luo Feng casually remarked on the opponent's weakness, reabsorbed his blade light back into his inner world, and then decided to take the Snow Tower Master and her tribe back to Huyang City via an avatar, while his main body continued his journey of exploration across the continent. Rumors subsequently spread that Luo Feng had likely reached the second realm of God King, a claim he neither confirmed nor denied. Luo Feng is publicly recognized by high-level figures after he demonstrates overwhelming combat comprehension and realm progression, being praised as a once-in-history godly king who advanced from the first realm to the second realm in just over 2 centuries. The monarch of Yu country explicitly comments on his unprecedented growth, while Luo Feng responds calmly, implying that many exist stronger than him, effectively acknowledging his second realm level standing. His true advantage is not just realm elevation but his self-developed secret techniques, including chaotic whole undying light and great extinction style, along with continuous creation of higher realm techniques despite his current cultivation stage. He deliberately maintains this pattern to refine his understanding of the laws of life and destruction, noting that with focused cultivation he could easily stabilize and progress further, even toward the second realm or beyond. The monarch of Yu country praises his potential, suggesting he may eventually reach the ultimate realm. Luo Feng counters that the ultimate realm is far more difficult than the second realm, pointing out that although past eras saw many emperors and monarchs achieve it, in the current era only a few exist at that level, such as the Lord of 10,000 Realms and Emperor Chang. The monarch himself admits he has not comprehended even one ultimate realm technique, emphasizing the gap in comprehension between top-tier beings. Luo Feng's earlier battle against a second realm godly king using only a single blade light spreads rapidly across the land of origin, with detailed battle recordings circulating. The Emperor of Tian Kun of Shi country analyzes the strike in depth, noting its terrifying conceptual attributes such as inevitability, absolute cutting intent, and sustained energy coherence. He concludes that this is not a weapon-based secret treasure but pure condensed prowess, refined to an extremely high realm. He even admits that in a full power state with his primordial bloodline, he might only barely match that single blade, although he feels a complex sense of pressure and chooses to maintain distance from Luo Feng. He does not consider himself in mortal danger due to his strong vitality and reincarnation capacity. The political ripple continues. Emperor Di Yan of Flamewind Ancient Country evaluates Luo Feng's value as a guest elder. He notes Luo Feng's ability to create multiple avatars, making him extremely useful for handling large-scale and dangerous tasks, effectively equivalent to multiple godly kings. However, he is concerned about interference from Luo Feng's master, Emperor Chu, who would inevitably protect his disciples' interests, limiting the Flamewind Ancient Country's ability to fully exploit him. After revealing part of his strength, Luo Feng continues his journey across the land of origin. He travels through prosperous cities of Shi country and then into wilderness regions, where he directly observes systemic brutality. In one incident, he witnesses a military warship targeting a small tribe of only a few thousand beings. The force consists of 10 void true gods and 100 true gods, using a secret treasure to manifest a massive swallowing bag intended to capture the entire tribe for consumption offerings. The tribe panics and attempts to flee. However, before the massacre proceeds, a commanding force intervenes, teleporting the warship billions of kilometers away and saving the tribe. Luo Feng observes that this is not an isolated event but a structured system. Shi country maintains urban prosperity by periodically consuming wilderness populations and, during territorial annexations, even exterminates entire royal capitals. He notes that Emperor Tian Kun uses controlled cycles of consumption, sparing some tribes for sustainability while conducting large-scale slaughter during expansion. Luo Feng concludes that such behavior is not unique in the land of origin, but part of a broader, more brutal norm where large nations dominate weaker ones through systematic predation. Continuing his journey, Luo Feng traverses multiple secondary and tertiary nations, including Tianmu Kingdom, Wenji Kingdom, and regions near Thunder Ancient Country, eventually entering the Tianji icefield. In this frozen expanse, extreme cold makes survival difficult outside fortified cities, forcing most beings to concentrate in settlements. While walking alone in a snowstorm, Luo Feng hears a distant musical performance. The sound is unusually profound, emotionally resonant, and carries a rare purity that stands out even after his extensive travels. Following the music, he finds a desolate ice-covered city where a young man in white, and Fengya, plays a leaf instrument on the city wall, producing melodies that spread across the entire city and briefly immerse Luo Feng in deep personal memories of his past life, his wife Xu Xin and his children Luo Ping and Luo Hai. However, the performance occurs during an execution scenario. An elite military unit led by General Yun surrounds the city, waiting for the music to end before capturing or killing Fengya under orders tied to the Ju Yi god Cain. The unit transforms into a massive black exotic beast using combined power and a secret technique. Launching an attack, Fengya responds with his own musical technique, forming illusory realms to resist. But he is ultimately overwhelmed due to insufficient strength. At the critical moment, Luo Feng appears sitting casually on the city wall with a wine jug. His presence instantly freezes the battlefield. The enormous beast and surrounding forces are immobilized without resistance. He calmly acknowledges Fengya, then investigates his background through the Flame Wind Pavilion. He learns that Fengya is a wandering musician who travels across cities, once intervening to save a city of hundreds of millions of beings from being devoured. thereby injuring the son of the Juyi god king and becoming a fugitive hunted by imperial forces. Luo Feng questions him about risking himself for strangers. And Fengye explains that he believes one life is worth sacrificing for hundreds of millions. And that all beings are part of the same fundamental existence. His conviction is absolute and reflected in his music, which Luo Feng recognizes as genuine rather than performative. Luo Feng internally contrasts this with his own limits. He is willing to sacrifice for those he knows, but not for strangers at such scale. Moved by Fengye's talent and worldview, Luo Feng offers him the position of 20th registered disciple. Fengye hesitates, citing his conflict with the Juyi god king. Luo Feng responds decisively that from this moment onward, there will be no Juyi god king in the land of origin, implying direct elimination rather than negotiation. This removes the obstacle, and Fengye immediately accepts, formally becoming his disciple. At the same time, Luo Feng dispatches an avatar across the void, actively initiating a search to locate and eliminate the Juyi god king, signaling that the conflict has escalated from personal protection to full eradication. In a majestic palace's quiet room, Juyi god king reveals his true form, an enormous avian life form wrapped in ink like mist, with a faint blood-red crown mark and half-open, cold eyes. He originates from the primordial cosmos and entered the land of origin through the samsara channel. In his native world, he is a born predator that devours other beings instinctively, once turning entire regions into empty hunting grounds. Over time, he became the most feared existence at the edge of that cosmos, leaving only devastation behind. Even after arriving in the land of origin, his power continued to rise, and he eventually reclaimed control of his original cosmos, with his incarnation still consuming life to satisfy his nature. Despite this, he remains dissatisfied, believing he is still not strong enough to act freely, and dreams of turning the entire land of origin into his hunting ground. At that moment, an invisible force descends. Without warning or resistance, Juyi god king is completely erased from existence, leaving only his scattered weapons and treasures. Luo Feng appears in the quiet room and calmly states he was too weak, killed effortlessly by a partial use of his great extinction style, a curse-like technique combining 6 Tao of life and death branches that can destroy both true bodies and resurrection carriers. Juyi god king has no time to use reincarnation, and even his survival backup is annihilated instantly. Luo Feng then extends the attack, wiping out most of his 7 children, sparing only one daughter who rejects his path. With his death, his primordial cosmos and associated small universe collapse, freeing countless beings who had lived as prey under his rule for countless eras. Though the event draws attention, it is treated as routine among godly kings, since most can normally reincarnate. But Luo Feng's technique prevents any recovery by destroying the resurrection carrier itself. After sending his disciple and Fengye back to Huyang City, Luo Feng continues his journey across the land of origin, passing through the Tianji icefield and entering the Fire Ancestor realm, a warm, life-rich region shaped by the Fire Ancestor's presence. There he observes multiple top-tier existences, including the Fire Ancestor and Wind City Empress, and notes that the Fire Ancestor, though not contending for power, protects vast numbers of beings. Luo Feng shows respect before moving on. He later enters the East Extreme Domain, a barren region where indigenous tribes live simply, relying on internal comprehension of the Tao rather than external treasures, yet still producing powerful cultivators. Reflecting on their path, Luo Feng concludes that no single cultivation path is absolutely correct. Eventually, he reaches the edge of the land of origin and gazes into the universe ocean, contemplating the nature of cosmic order and cultivation, realizing that true cultivators must transcend it rather than follow it. After centuries of accumulation through various trainings and treasures, Luo Feng's will finally undergoes a qualitative transformation, condensing into a spirit body that manifests outside his physical form, marking a breakthrough beyond the limits of a godly king's will and placing him among the few beings who have reached this higher spiritual realm.